He told me over dinner, his voice steady, as if he were reading the weather. 25 years collapsed into that pause between sentences, and I realized he had already rehearsed my silence. I am Mara, 52, living in a house that still knows my footsteps. The evening light comes in slanted through the kitchen window, catching dust I haven't had the energy to wipe away. When my husband chose someone younger, it wasn't the betrayal that surprised me. It was how calm the room felt, as if it had been waiting for me to speak. The fork stopped halfway to his mouth, not dramatically, just long enough for me to notice. The refrigerator hummed behind us, steady and patient, like it always had been. The light above the table buzzed faintly, the way it did when it needed replacing, and I made a mental note I wouldn't follow through on. Outside, somewhere down the block, a sprinkler clicked on. Once, twice. Wetting a lawn that didn't belong to us anymore. Not really. That's when he said it, softly, as if the house might overhear and take sides. We'd been eating the same dinner we always ate on Tuesdays. Chicken cooled too fast on white plates. Rice clumped where it had been stirred and forgotten. The window over the sink was cracked open an inch, letting in the evening. Warm, dusty, quiet. I sat in my chair the way I always did, left leg crossed under the right, napkin folded once, not twice. These were habits you don't realize are habits until something threatens to end them. He cleared his throat. Didn't look at me. I've been thinking, he said, which was never a good way to begin. Thinking had always meant deciding without rehearsal. Thinking meant conclusions. I watched his hands instead, familiar hands. Scar near the knuckle from the year we tried to fix the fence ourselves, a vein that stood out when he was tired. There's someone else. The words landed without noise, no thud, no echo. They simply existed between us like a chair pulled out and left there. I waited for the room to change, for the light to flicker, for something cinematic to happen, but nothing did. The refrigerator kept humming. The chicken kept cooling. My heart stayed quiet, as if it had already been told. He said her name once. Just once. It sounded younger than I expected, like a word that hadn't lived long enough to gather weight. He didn't repeat it, didn't shape it again with his mouth, as if saying it twice might bruise the air between us. I didn't plan this, he said. I never do, I thought, but didn't say. He talked about timing, about needs, about how life doesn't always follow the path you expect, even when you do everything right. He spoke in sentences that could have been taken from a pamphlet. Clean edges, no fingerprints. He never said love. I nodded. Once, then again. Small movements. The kind that don't invite interruption. My fork lay untouched now. A grain of rice clung to its tine, stubborn and white. I focused on that grain, how it refused to fall, how it stayed exactly where it was placed. Outside, the sprinkler clicked again, faithful, dull. It moved in an arc, back and forth, watering the same patch of grass like it believed repetition could fix anything. I wondered if he expected me to cry or to thank him for his honesty, and which would disappoint him more. I didn't want to hurt you, he said, finally looking up. Our eyes met for the first time since the sentence began. His expression was careful, almost kind, the face of a man stepping back from a ledge he's already crossed. I know, I said. The words surprised both of us. I felt the stillness settle into my body the way it always had, like a practice skill. I'd learned it years ago, during hospital waits and phone calls that came too late. Stillness was how you survived moments that wanted to hollow you out. He reached for his water glass, then stopped. His hand hovered, uncertain. I noticed how age had crept into him quietly. Lines I hadn't counted before, a softness at the jaw. I don't want this to be ugly, he said. I thought about all the ways beauty leaves without permission. How quietly. How politely. It doesn't have to be, I said, and meant something different than he heard. He exhaled, relieved, mistaking my calm for consent, mistaking silence for surrender. The refrigerator clicked off. The room went quieter than before. In that quiet, I understood something simple and sharp. He had already left. This was just the announcement, the paperwork of departure, and I had already survived worse than empty chairs. He pushed his plate away, appetite gone. I watched the circle of condensation his glass left on the table, a temporary mark that would disappear by morning. "I'll sleep in the other room tonight," he said. I nodded again, still practicing. When he stood, his chair legs scraped softly against the floor. The sound lingered longer than his footsteps as he walked away. Down the hallway, toward the guest room we had once prepared for futures that never arrived. The sprinkler outside clicked off at last. The sudden silence felt earned. I sat there alone, hands folded, listening to the house remember us. And for the first time that evening, I didn't wonder what he expected from me anymore. I wondered what I would say next. The hallway light flickered when I turned it on, not enough to go dark, just enough to remind me it was tired. I stood at the edge of the kitchen, listening to the house after him. Doors have a way of holding onto footsteps. So do walls. The clock above the stove ticked louder than it had all evening, as if it had finally been given permission to speak. Somewhere down the hall, a floorboard creaked, not from movement, from memory. I didn't follow him to the guest room. Instead, I let the house lead me. I walked slowly, barefoot, the way you do at night when you don't want to wake. Anything. Children, ghosts, old versions of yourself. The carpet had thinned in places, worn down by years of the same paths taken again and again. Bedroom to bathroom, bathroom to kitchen, kitchen to the front door. A map of ordinary days. The first door I opened was the linen closet. Clean cotton smell, lavender soap tucked in the corner, towels stacked the way I liked them, edges aligned, colors fading in the same direction. I pressed my palm against them, feeling their quiet warmth, as if they'd been waiting. Down the hall, the guest room door was closed now, a polite boundary. I passed it without stopping. The living room held its breath when I entered. Evening lights slanted through the blinds, striping the walls in gold and shadow. Dust floated lazily, unbothered by endings. The couch sagged in the middle, shaped by years of shared weight. Our weight. I sat for a moment, then stood again. Sitting felt like staying, and I wasn't ready to decide what staying meant. I went into the bedroom we had shared. The room smelled faintly of detergent and something else. Him, maybe. Or the idea of him. The bed was still made from that morning, corners tight, pillows stacked the way we'd agreed on years ago without remembering the conversation. I opened the closet. His clothes hung neatly on the left, mine on the right, like they'd always respected that invisible line. Jackets brushed my arm as I reached in, wool and cotton, familiar textures. I pulled one of his shirts free, blue, soft at the collar. It still held the crease from the last time I ironed it. I didn't cry. I waited to. Nothing came. Instead, a memory arrived without warning. Not a scene, just a sensation. The weight of his arm across my back in winter, the sound of his breathing when he thought I was asleep, the way he used to stand in this doorway, leaning, undecided about nothing in particular. I folded the shirt carefully and set it back in place. On the dresser, a photograph sat face down. I turned it over. The three of us at the lake years ago, sunburned, laughing too hard. Proof that happiness can exist without permanence. I put the picture back where it was. The bathroom light was too bright. It always had been. Honest light. The kind that refuses to flatter. I leaned over the sink and studied my reflection, waiting for it to look like someone abandoned. It didn't. The woman looking back at me had lines she'd earned. Lines from squinting into sun, from smiling at small victories, from holding things together longer than expected. I ran the tap. Water rushed, cold and clear. I let it run longer than necessary, listening to it fill the room, drown out thoughts that didn't deserve volume. That's when it settled in, not as pain, but as clarity. He hadn't chosen her over me. He'd chosen a version of himself that didn't have to remember everything this house remembered. A life without echoes, without accountability, without the quiet weight of being known. I turned the water off. The silence that followed felt different now. Less like loss, more like space. I returned to the hallway and rested my hand against the wall. The paint was cool, solid. Still here. From behind the guest room door, I heard the faint rustle of sheets, the careful movements of someone trying not to be noticed. I didn't move toward the sound. I didn't move away from it either. Instead, I walked to the front door and unlocked it, just to feel the click. Just to remind myself that doors still answered to me. Outside, night had settled fully. The air smelled like damp grass and distance. I closed the door gently and leaned my forehead against it, listening to the house hold me. Tomorrow I would speak again, but tonight I let the rooms remember for both of us. Sleep didn't come all at once. It arrived in pieces. The ceiling fan turned slowly above me, counting seconds without mercy. A car passed somewhere outside, tires hissing on asphalt still warm from the day. In the other room, a bed shifted. Not loudly, just enough to announce another body trying to settle into a borrowed space. That's when she appeared. Not in my dreams, but in the quiet before them. Not a face, a shape. Light. Unfinished. Standing where certainty should have been. I lay on my side, facing the window. Moonlight slipped through the gap in the curtains, thin and pale, touching the edge of the dresser, the curve of my shoulder. The room felt larger without conversation in it, as if it had stretched when he left the bed. I tried to imagine her the way people do when they're supposed to feel threatened. Younger, brighter, faster to forgive. The kind of woman whose laughter comes easily, whose mornings don't ache. I tried to give her a face and failed. She wouldn't stay still long enough. Instead, I imagined angles, the slope of a shoulder not yet taught to carry history, hands that hadn't learned how much weight a promise can hold, a voice that didn't know which words to avoid. The thought didn't sting the way I expected. It landed somewhere colder, quieter. In the dark, I realized I wasn't competing with her. I never had been. You don't compete with time. You live inside it until someone decides they don't want to anymore. The fan clicked once as it turned. The house adjusted. Morning came without ceremony. Pale light. No bird song worth noting. I moved through the kitchen quietly, kettle on, cup placed just so. I noticed how my hands knew where everything was, even with my eyes half closed. Muscle memory built over decades doesn't vanish overnight. As the water warmed, the thought returned. Not jealousy, curiosity. What did she know about him? What didn't she know yet? I pictured him explaining himself to her the way he had to me last night, carefully, neatly, without the mess of truth. I imagined her nodding, sympathetic, believing she was being trusted rather than spared. The kettle clicked off. I poured slowly, watching steam rise and disappear. Temporary things have a way of announcing themselves. I sat at the table alone, the chair across from me empty but present. I wondered if she had sat at a table like this before, if she understood what it meant to arrive after the story had already been written and assume you were the ending. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. Someone laughed 2 houses down. Life moved forward without instruction. And that's when I understood something quietly devastating. He didn't choose her because she was younger. He chose her because she didn't know him yet. The realization didn't break me. It steadied me. Being known is heavy. It asks things of you. It keeps receipts. It remembers the versions of you that needed help tying shoes and the ones that failed at apologies. To be known is to be accountable to your own past. She was light because she had no history with him, no winters, no hospital corridors, no shared silences that spoke louder than words. She was a clean page, and he was tired of reading the margins. I rinsed my cup and set it in the rack. The sound it made, ceramic against metal, felt final. I wiped the counter, noticing a faint ring where his glass had been the night before. I scrubbed once, then stopped. Some marks don't need erasing. In the mirror above the sink, my reflection caught me again. This time, I smiled, not because I felt joy, because I felt intact. I hadn't lost anything essential. He had. I stepped outside onto the porch, barefoot on cool wood. The morning air carried the smell of wet earth and possibility. Somewhere nearby, a lawnmower started up, rough and insistent. I stood there longer than necessary, letting the day see me. Behind me, the house was quiet, not wounded, just awake, waiting. I knew then that when I spoke again, it wouldn't be to explain myself, or to bargain, or to compete with a shape that hadn't finished becoming real. It would be to name something true. I went back inside and closed the door softly, already hearing the sentence form, not sharp, not cruel, just honest enough to leave him speechless. He came back in the late afternoon when the light slants low and generous, forgiving the dust you missed in the morning. The front door opened with the same familiar complaint, hinges that needed oil, things we'd always meant to fix. I heard his footsteps pause in the entryway, a hesitation, as if the house had surprised him by still being here. I stayed where I was, at the dining table, hands folded, back straight. Some sentences take years to learn, others arrive fully formed and wait. He said my name first softly, like a test. I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to feel the distance traveled. "I'm just here to grab a few things," he said. "Of course," I replied, my voice even. It sounded like someone else's, someone steadier. He moved down the hall, opening drawers with care, choosing shirts as if they were fragile. I watched from the doorway when he reached the bedroom. The afternoon light traced his outline, revealing details I hadn't studied in years. The slope of his shoulders, the way his hair thinned at the crown. He packed slowly, too slowly, the way people do when they hope for interruption. On the wall near the closet, faint pencil marks still showed, heights measured, years counted. We'd never painted over them. It felt wrong to erase proof that someone had grown here. He touched the wall without realizing it. His fingers hovered, then dropped. "I didn't plan for this to be hard," he said. I nodded. "I know." He exhaled again, relief flickering across his face. He still mistook my calm for agreement, still believed gentleness meant weakness. I let him believe it a moment longer. He zipped the bag halfway, then stopped, sat on the edge of the bed like a man waiting for instructions. "I don't want us to hate each other," he said. I leaned against the doorframe. The wood pressed solid into my back, anchoring. "There's no need for that," I said. He looked up then, searching my face for something. Anger, maybe, or grief, or permission. "What are you thinking?" he asked. The question hung between us, earnest, late. I thought about all the words I could use, sharp ones, clever ones, sentences designed to leave bruises. I'd had years to collect them, every marriage does, but those weren't the words that mattered. I stepped fully into the room. The floor creaked beneath my feet, one soft protest, then silence. I met his eyes, really met them, and felt something settle into place. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that I won't beg." He blinked. "I won't compete with a calendar," I continued, "and I won't pretend this happened to me instead of something you chose." He opened his mouth, closed it again. "I stayed," I said. When staying was hard, I learned who I was because of that. And knowing yourself, really knowing yourself, isn't something you get to borrow. The room felt suddenly smaller, as if the walls had leaned in to listen. His face changed then, not with anger, not even with shame, with recognition. He looked at me as if he were seeing the cost for the first time, not the cost to me, but the cost to himself. The years he'd stepped away from, the witness he was losing. "I didn't mean," he started. "I know," I said gently, "but meaning isn't the same as responsibility." He stood, the bag forgotten at his feet, the space between us filled with everything we hadn't said in decades, every compromise, every quiet forgiveness, every ordinary day that had required effort. "I hope she makes you happy," I added. He flinched, just slightly. "I really do," I said, "but she won't know you the way I do, and one day you'll notice the difference." Silence followed, not the heavy kind, the honest kind. He picked up the bag. This time the zipper went all the way. At the door he turned back once more, his mouth opened, searching. Nothing came. He nodded instead. A small acknowledgement. Then he stepped out, pulling the door closed behind him with care, as if gentleness might still count for something. I stood in the quiet that followed, listening to the echo fade. The house felt different now, not emptied, clarified. Sunlight warmed the wall where the pencil marks were. Dust drifted, unafraid. I exhaled slowly, feeling the sentence settle fully inside me. Not sharp, not cruel, just complete. And for the first time since the announcement, I knew exactly what would come next. The door closed the way it always had, not slammed, not hurried, just a soft, practiced click, followed by the quiet settling of the frame. The sound moved through the house like a final note, lingering longer than it should have. I stayed where I was, hand still resting against the wall, listening to the absence arrange itself. Outside, a car engine turned over, paused, then faded down the street. The house didn't rush to fill the silence. I respected it. So did I. I walked back to the dining table and sat in the same chair as before. The wood felt cool through my clothes, familiar, patient. Evening light pooled across the floor, stopping just short of my feet, as if unsure whether to cross that last distance. I reached for the kettle without thinking, muscle memory again, water in, switch on. The small routines didn't ask questions, they just showed up. As the kettle warmed, I noticed how my breathing had changed, slower, deeper, as if my body had been holding something in place for years and had finally been told it could rest. I poured the water and set the mug down, watching steam rise and vanish. I didn't drink it right away. Let it cool. Let myself cool. The house creaked once, a settling sound, not a complaint. Somewhere, a pipe ticked. The clock resumed its steady rhythm. These were the noises of a place that knew how to continue. I realized then that I wasn't waiting anymore, not for an apology, not for regret, not even for understanding. Waiting had been a chapter. This was something else. I stood and moved through the rooms one last time, not searching, just noticing. The couch cushion where he always sat, the bookshelf where we'd argued about which novels to keep, the corner of the kitchen counter nicked from a dropped plate years ago. I ran my thumb over the mark and smiled faintly. Nothing had been ruined. In the bedroom, I smoothed the bedspread, then stopped myself, left it imperfect, a small rebellion, a reminder that order didn't have to mean erasure. I opened the window wider. Evening air slipped in, carrying the scent of cut grass and distant dinners. Somewhere, someone laughed. Life didn't lower its voice for me. It didn't need to. On the dresser, the photograph from the lake still sat where I'd left it. I picked it up, again. Studied the faces. I didn't linger on him. I lingered on mine. The woman in that picture hadn't known what was coming, but she'd been strong anyway, strong without practice. I set the photo back down, face up this time. At the front door, I paused. The lock caught the light, small and unassuming. I turned it once, twice. The sound was firm, decisive. I leaned my forehead against the door, wood cool against my skin, and allowed myself a single quiet breath that felt like relief. Not victory, Not triumph, release. The kind that comes when you stop carrying something that was never meant to be yours alone. I understood now that what I'd said hadn't silenced him out of cruelty. It had silenced him because it was true. And truth has a way of standing where noise used to be. I straightened, rolled my shoulders back, and laughed softly at myself. The sound surprised me. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't forced. It sounded like permission. Permission to be unfinished. To begin without asking. To take up space without explaining why. I returned to the table and finally lifted the mug. The tea was warm now, not hot. Drinkable. Right. Night settled fully outside the windows, calm and unremarkable. The house glowed softly around me, holding its shape, holding mine. Tomorrow would bring phone calls, logistics, conversations that required voices steadier than I'd practiced before. But tonight was mine. I sat in the quiet I'd earned, listening to the clock-mark time that no longer belonged to him. And as I took my first sip, I understood something simple and lasting. Some endings don't need witnesses. They only need the courage to close the door and stay.